the vertical alignment is slightly off. My moving image is slightly high, so I'll tighten that screw at the back and check again. It's still high. I'll slacken that front screw just a tiny bit. Tighten the one at the back, check again. These adjustments are pretty subtle. You know, you've got to, if you think you've moved it, you've probably moved it too far. Yeah, I've just moved it too far. Okay, let's back up a bit. It's not helped by these screws being somewhat, the threads on them are damaged. That's pretty good. My horizontal alignment's still out, so I need to unlock this. This is the lock screw. Just loosen that slightly. Rotate this slightly to swing the arm out a bit. And check to see if the images converge at the infinity position. And they do, but as I said, the adjustments are subtle. I've gone too far. So I'm going to take that back slightly. The images, as you move the focus scale ring towards the infinity position, the images should coincide just at the point the focus scale ring reaches the infinity stop, not before. And it's a very subtle adjustment. That seems very good there. So I'll lock that adjustment screw and check again, because it's not uncommon for the setting to move when you lock the adjustment, and it just did. Yeah, no, it's definitely shifted when I locked the adjustment. So I'm having to adjust and lock and then check. Now it's very good now. So my vertical alignment's good, my horizontal alignment is good, and really the top cover could just about go back on if I put my frame counter together. Let's start with that. So I'll give this a wipe with some molybdenum paste, although you could use just about anything there. That goes together like this. Just wipe a synthetic grease in the centre, around the outside, because that's where the spring has to sit, and I want it to stay there. Come on camera, keep up. Let's take the advance knob off, put this on the post. Now I've got to get the top cover back over. The top cover I've cleaned the glass, cleaned the inside. It's all looking quite shiny in there. I've got to hook this over the catch at the back here, the advanced retard lever, and then to press the shutter release all the way. So I've got to advance the film advance until that's loose, And if you do it right, everything just pops up like that. I'll pop that advance knob back on. The advanced rewind lever sometimes shifts when you do that, and you've got to muck around with it to get it right. Okay, that looks good. I'll just check looking through the finder and make sure that it's still looking good. That rangefinder's, it's shifted. Something shifted in the rangefinder image. Now that could be just down to the angle of the pieces of glass in the top cover here. If one's slightly this way and one's slightly that way, that's enough to throw those images apart. Okay, I'll just check that. No, that seems fine now. I just went back in and made another fine adjustment. Let's get these screws in the top cover. Check that the frame counter engages and moves smoothly. That looks good. The film advance knob, of course, I need to tighten that up. So I've got my spanner here to hold the top of the take-up spool. Just tighten that up. Alright, check that. The frame counter moves nicely too. The shutter release button here can go back on. Of course, this is not a good fit, this one, is it? What did I decide about that? That the thread wasn't good, or that it was slightly bent, one or the other? Yeah, it's not square. It's not square with that shaft, and it is tight on the thread. There's something odd about that. It means it won't get lost. But it should be a bit better than that. Okay, that's good. Where's my rewind knob? I'll put the rewind knob in place. I'll just put something through the fork of the rewind. Tighten that up. Okay, so the top of the camera body's good. I can put my leather back on the base here now. I'll give this a wipe down with some naphtha to remove that greasy mark there, which is where the Zeiss bumps were, of course. And at the top here, this is really nasty. This is where the depth of field scale was, and the amount of verdigris and rubbish under there is quite amazing. I'm using naphtha here, and that breaks up that greasy muck. I don't know what that green stuff is. It certainly has the green colour of verdigris, but it's greasy. It's like a wax or a soap. I'm sure someone out there knows more about chemistry than me, and they could suggest what that might be. Right, that looks good. So I'll apply some glue and we'll put this in place. Might have been a bit generous there, I think. Let's tip some of that over there. Need to get the adhesive to the edges. The edges are the most important bit. Leatherettes don't start falling off from the inside out. They start peeling up from the edges. That's where you need your adhesive. You need good cover. Okay, that looks quite good. Bring this camera body back into the picture. Put our leather back in place. Rub that sticky adhesive away while it's still in the wet phase. Of course, we've lost our Zeiss bumps there now. I hope no one complains about that. And we have our depth of field scale is going to go right there, which means that we want our tripod sockets around there. It's important to have the text the right way up, otherwise it won't look right when you flip the camera over. These screws are chrome brass, so they're a little bit delicate. Treat them with respect, otherwise you'll end up slipping and scarring them, or otherwise creating chaos. So this depth of field scale here, we've got various bits here. This piece, we have the wavy washer that provides a bit of resistance on it so it doesn't just rattle about. Goes there. Scale ring there. Let's put a little wipe of synthetic grease around the edge of this so that that'll revolve smoothly. Okay, now I've got to line up those two screw holes, and the screws again, they are chrome brass. So if you're not careful, you'll end up damaging them. Right, our scale moves nice and freely, no problem there. Of course we have no more Zeiss bump there. That's a shame. That's the camera body back together. But of course, I've got to service the shutter and lens assembly. And so, that's next. Okay, start with the shutter. First I want these shims off the back. There's quite a few shims here. I'll put those with a retaining ring. The rear group, will that unscrew? Yes, it does. Typically a group like that should unscrew with your fingers. It's got no notches on it. You'd need a friction tool to remove it otherwise. Be a bit cautious about this. The glass extends out at the base there, and it doesn't quite extend out at the back, so I'll be able to put it up that way in the holder. The front group, yeah, that was not exactly finger tight, should have been. And here we have our shutter. And we know this one's got problems because the slow speeds are pretty naff. What's it like on a half second? I can hear it clicking. Yeah, it did work. Only needed to be thumped once or twice. Okay, we need this open. Right, this lock screw, I'll just rotate that. And we can rotate this, that'll free that ring up, at least it should do. Let's get it a bit better. There it is. And here, this is the shutter speed settings cam plate. I'm going to take this screw out here for the indicator for the aperture settings. It's a bit of a fight getting that ring off over the top otherwise, so we'll have that off, then we won't have to fight. So that was our settings, speed settings cam plate. The shutter release just fell straight out of the body. I'll unhook the spring here from the post. That's our main spring for the shutter. And we'll lift this out. This piece is called the main lever. It's a bit dirty and sticky. Right, there's not much to take out here really. This piece here is the catch that holds the shutter in the cocked position. Lift that out with its screw. This one here is the return spring for the shutter release. It would also be where the cable release would go on an earlier example of this shutter. Earlier ones would have had a cable release socket here, or indeed a plunger in the earliest Retinas. Okay, so that's off. This is the high speed spring, the 500th of a second speed spring. Here's our B lever. Now that'll be a shoulder screw there. You want that off. Be cautious when you go to put that back, because if you're over enthusiastic tightening it up, the shoulder will bite into the plate, which effectively closes up the gap so that the lever wouldn't move smoothly again. Okay. Oh yeah, you can see this is sticky. Look at that. I moved the blade actuating ring, the blades just stayed. It's really nasty. How it even moved at all on boat, if I know. The speed train likewise, if I hold back the cam here, this should swing freely in and out. That's just barely crawling across there. So the shutter certainly needs to be serviced. And we need to get into it now. We've done all we can to taking those bits apart. So we've got 3 screws at the back here. These hold the shutter case and the mechanism plate together. Those 3 screws are identical, and they are common to a whole range of earlier shutters, Compur type shutters. Compur Rapids, the early Synchro Compurs. And here we have the shutter blades. Those shutter blades don't look too bad there. You just tip those off. I expected them to be quite oily. Let's see if they are. Well, they don't tip off. So that's a sign that they're a bit oily, I would say. Yeah, they're a bit stuck together. But they look quite good. They should clean up well. Here's our mechanism plate, stripped down. Let's see how it behaves. Yeah, it doesn't. That's as gummy as. I mean, that doesn't even return. That's just very, very sticky. Okay. So we can remove this, unhook that spring. This lever, I can tell that lever's not the problem because it's got a little bit of play in there, there's a little bit of backlash and it's showing no signs of stickiness at all. So that tells me that our problem is all down here in the mechanism plate. It's just gummy. Right, 1, 2, we've got 3 retaining screws. Possibly one of these is longer than the others. If it is, it'll be this one. Important that you don't let your screwdriver slip and cam out, because otherwise it'll damage those screw heads and then they'll be very hard to get out. That's another long screw. So we've got 2 long screws and 1 short. Okay, well that's an unusual mix. Okay, there's the retaining plate, and here's the blade actuating ring. And it's not much to see here, it doesn't look particularly anything, but obviously it was sticky and not moving smoothly. So it means that it's sticky with dried grease. This mechanism plate will need to be cleaned, and I'm going to flush this with naphtha, or wipe all of this with naphtha and a cotton bud. Flush out this speed train and make sure I get all the older lubricants and dust and stuff out of there, because that's very sluggish. That should move quite freely and it doesn't. And here we have the diaphragm. Now that moves quite well. I can see oil on the blades here, but you know, there's not an awful lot showing, and this moves quite freely. There's some resistance there, but the blades don't look distorted, so that suggests to me that the stiffness I'm feeling is probably dried grease underneath the setting lever. Well, this is one of those fun ones to do where you can't put the screws into this piece last. Okay. Oh well, we'll get it done. The retaining screws, 3 retaining screws. And in this case they are all identical, and later shutters one of them would have been countersunk. Let's tip this lot out. Okay. There's our diaphragm blades. Now they look quite clean. That retaining plate's got a bad look to it though. It's very tough. In fact, it's corroded. You can see that surface. It's very dull and it probably feels rough. I'll try. Yeah, same. The other surface is the same. So both surfaces are the same, and it's like a surface corrosion. Here you can see a faint mark here and here. It looks like the edge of a blade or something's run across there. There's one there too. They're even. So it looks like a blade's run across there, just the edge of the blade. Let's see what this is like, see what the setting lever is like. Okay, the setting lever here for our aperture, that's the stiffness. That's where the stiffness in the diaphragm was, because I've got the same resistance there as I had when the blades were present. So it had nothing to do with those diaphragm blades. They were not causing a problem. I mean, they look quite clean. We did see a tiny patch of oil on there, but it was obviously not causing a problem. So I'll just take these 2 screws out. And the moving plate, this is the one that swings the blades inwards and outwards. And here we have the setting lever at the back, and you can see quite clearly there that dirty yellow patch, that sticky old grease. And of course sticky old grease has got to go. So I'll start cleaning things. That retaining plate though, that dull look, I don't like that. I think I'm going to end up polishing that with a bit of brasso to take that off, because that sort of finish means that it's rough, and it means that the shutter blades won't swing freely across it. this piece doesn't look a hell of a lot better too. There might have been some, I don't know whether dampness would have accounted for that. Everything else looks pretty clean on this camera. I think that's probably right down to the original manufacture. The shutter may have been serviced before, it certainly should have been, but there's also a possibility that this camera has never been serviced before. I mean, it's only about 70 years old, so why would it? Right, I'll start cleaning these pieces up, and I'll start with the case. So I'll just use some naphtha. And the thread here is quite dirty. It's where the retaining ring went on. The inside one, of course, is where the rear lens grip screws in. Of course, the shutter's fairly open to the atmosphere, so you know, any dust or contaminants will easily find their way in. And because of the construction, I've got to put the settings lever back on here before I assemble the diaphragm, which just makes for a minor complication. I'd rather not have that, but that's the way it is. With later shutters, what they did was they had two little notches in this retaining plate so that you could rotate the aperture, the settings lever to a certain position, and you could access the screws through those notches. But that came after this. This is older and not as refined as its younger siblings. Well, that'll do nicely. Let's set this settings lever. Oh yeah, that's pretty bad. That's thick and nasty, that grease, that's gone like candle wax. That's stopped being a lubricant and started being a handbrake, really. Okay. And moving plate, I'll just clean that, but I think I'm going to end up polishing that. Yeah, it's typically when you see patterns of corrosion like that, often they're obvious fingerprints, and it's where someone has held the thing between finger and thumb and perspiration and skin oils have etched into it. But I'm not seeing an obvious fingerprint there. It might be a very smudged fingerprint. Yeah, this is very greasy. You see the colour of that's coming off quite yellow. It's got to be all clean. Now some of that discoloration will be the grease. A certain amount of it might be to do with the metal itself. It might be some of the corroded metal is coming away. That surface is quite good by comparison. It's not stunning, but it's, you know, you wouldn't remark on that at all. That's not bad. But this surface, yeah, it's just, this is the surface that faces the shutter blades. That faces the diaphragm blades. So yeah, I'm going to polish that with a bit of Brasso. And the retaining plate here, I'm certainly going to do that too, because as I rub the cotton bud over here, I can feel the roughness of that surface. And it should be dead smooth. Yeah, the other side's exactly, in fact it's worse. Alright, I'll polish those with a bit of Brasso and then we'll move on.